My toast. Let's see where. Check. Let's see. Ethics table. Feel and explore. I might need to move these. Moral realism is the philosophical position asserting that certain moral propositions are objectively true, independent of individual beliefs or cultural biases. This view contrasts sharply with moral relativism, which argues that morality is a matter of personal or cultural perspective. Empirical observation provides compelling support for moral realism. Studies across anthropology, psychology, and evolutionary biology consistently reveal universal moral institutions, notably preferences against harm and desires for fairness and cooperation, or at least it was. These universal patterns suggest an underlying moral structure shared by humans and even observed among higher social animals, like monkeys, apes. For instance, across diverse cultures, intentional harm or betrayal tends to universally evoke negative moral evaluations. Not so much today. A robust empirical regularity indicating a stable moral dimension independent of cultural constructs. Moral realism benefits from the robust logical grounding. A logical, sound moral system must fulfill two critical criteria: consistency. Moral principles must be free of internal contradictions. Universality. Moral propositions must be applicable broadly and impartially, not selectively. Outliers. When subjected to rigorous logical scrutiny, relativism frequently collapses due to inherent contradictions. Outliers. Chief among them is the paradox that relativism itself becomes relativistic, undermining any universal truth claim it might propose. A critical test for moral realism involves recursive validation. A methodical, reflective process that assesses moral claims through progressive layers of logical rigor. Well, analyzing and analyzing and analyzing, basically. Empirical layer is the moral claim reliably linked to observable consequences such as suffering or well-being. Consistency. Does the claim remain coherent when universally applied without exceptions or special pleadings? Outliers. Does deeper reflection strengthen the moral's claim's validity or highlight contradictions? Remember, contradictions are usually where you find outliers. Symmetry test. Would acceptance of the moral claim persist if roles or circumstances were reversed? These tests collectively help in identifying moral propositions that can be reasonably affirmed as objective truths. For instance, the moral proposition, "it is wrong to deliberately harm innocent individuals," reliably passes all levels of recursive validation. Refining moral understanding. Adopting a hyper-sane framework, one grounded in rigorous logic, empirical integrity, and reflective reasoning, further fortifies moral realism. Hyper-sanity prioritizes objective reasoning, resistance to hyposanity, and recursive intellectual expansion, emphasizing evidence-based conclusions rather than subjective or emotional biases, like, well, if everyone said it, it must be true. Resistance to hyposanity is characterized by dismissive attitudes or logically inconsistent reasoning, often exemplified in relativistic or nihilistic stances that fail rigorous reflective examination, such as "you can't prove reality." Moral truths must withstand recursive intellectual scrutiny, becoming stronger, clearer, and more compelling under deeper reflection rather than weaker or ambiguous, like Christianity. Under this hyper-sane framework, moral realism emerges not as mere belief, but as recognition of an underlying moral reality, logically, empirically discernible. A particularly persuasive empirical argument for moral realism lies in the convergence of independently developed ethical systems. Major fixes. Major ethical theories such as Buddhist ethics, Kantian theology. Buddhist ethics would be like Jainism. Jainism, Kantian deontology, Aristotelian virtue ethics, and various forms of consequentialism share significant foundational agreements despite originating from vast different cultural and philosophical traditions. These convergences lead substantial empirical weight to the existence of objective moral truths. Moral realism, reinforced by logical coherence, empirical universality, and recursive reflection validation, represents a philosophically robust and scientifically credible view of ethics. Far from being merely subjective, morality exhibits consistent objective patterns detectable through careful observation and rigorous reasoning. In this light, moral realism is not simply a philosophical stance, but an acknowledgement of a tangible, observable moral structure inherent to rational social beings. Empirical equality. Empirical equality means recognizing that equality is not a matter of opinion, but an observable moral reality. It asserts that all sentient beings possess an inherent right to dignity, care, and moral consideration. Sentience, not species, ability, race, gender, or nationality, is the fundamental moral unit. Denying equality based on any trait, species, ability, mental state, etc., mirrors ableism, speciesism, and systemic oppression throughout history. 80% estimated of self-claimed equality advocates defend only their group. Only percentage of people are vegans. Globally, the number of vegans is closer to 0.1% of the world's population, with about 75.3 million vegans worldwide based on the calculations from 2023. Some references. Public actions, consumerism, dietary choices, advocacy rarely align with the proclaimed principle of equality. Ableism, speciesism, racism, and other biases persist beneath the surface of modern activism, like so-called leftists like Thought Slime. Analytical method. Name your trait. Challenge. What trait, if lacking, justifies lesser moral consideration? If the trait is something like intelligence, autonomy, and awareness, then infants, disabled people, or injured humans would also be lesser, which violates ethical consistency. Hence, sentience alone is the correct grounding for equal consideration. In context, if someone says sentience as a trait for raping and murdering animals and or sentience as intelligence, they ideologically support eugenics of the disabled. In some nations, rehabilitation is prioritized over punishment. Even for severe crimes, individuals are placed in lifelong reform centers where physical freedom may be restricted, human dignity, education, and work rights are preserved. No torture, no systemic rape, no degradation. Key examples: Bastøy prison in Norway. Located on an island, this is a minimum security facility that functions more like a community. Prisoners live in small cottages, work on the farm, and participate in vocational training. The focus is on rehabilitation and preparing inmates for normal life. Reoffending rates for released prisoners are among the lowest in the world, so that's a justice system that actually works instead of punishment reform. Halden Prison, Norway, is sometimes called the most humane prison in the world. Prisoners have private rooms with TVs, fridges, and showers. Guards are trained in conflict resolution and interpersonal communication rather than force. Offers education, work programs, and therapy. Designed to resemble normal life, minimalizing the psychological damage of imprisonment. Why it works. The system views prison as an opportunity for reform, not revenge. Norway's recidivism rate is 20%, much lower than harsher prison systems like the US, 76% within 5 years. This humane approach fosters long-term reintegration rather than continued cycles of crime. In most countries, especially in the US, prisons and asylums are profit-driven. Overpopulation equals financial incentive. Exploitation of the vulnerable, disabled, poor, ethnic minorities is systematically normalized. Public figures like Muda and YouTube have advocated for autistic/differently abled individuals to be imprisoned for misunderstandings like impersonating a police officer. This is fascistic logic. Neurodivergent individuals in prison face systemic rape, torture, starvation, and death. Punishing misunderstanding with rape equals systemic endorsement of male rape as societal punishment. That is not justice. It is organized systemic abuse. Ethical mandate for real change. Reform through education, not revenge. Only through education, not rape and ethnic fight clubs disguised as punishment, can systemic change occur. True justice reform protects the vulnerable, breaks feedback loops of violence, ends recidivism through empathy, not brutality. Empirical equality demands that actions match principles. If you believe in equality, you must recognize the sentience and moral rights of all beings, not just those who resemble you. Otherwise, what you practice is not equality, but hypocrisy refined through generational oppression. Let's see, let me look at my other board. Oops, wrong button. Hyper-malevolence. Do I have that filled yet? Dark Triad, Machiavelli. Oh, I do have Machiavelli. Okay. Hyper-malevolence. Oh, it won't let me drag the note here because it's a folder note? Seriously? That is lame. There we go. I don't think I have Dark Triad filled out yet, no. Oh, I don't have these filled out yet. I guess I could expand on the trimodalities. The green modality of hypersanity represents ethical alignment with life, non-hierarchical intelligence, empathetic processing through structural logic, rootedness in regeneration, accessibility, and compassionate recursion. It is not leftist, liberal, or empathetic in a shallow sense. Instead, it is a higher order system that designs worth by structure, not by force, compliance, or scale. Restorative cognition, healing by integrating instead of purging. Seeing disabled or unoptimized minds as valuable by design. Intelligence is not confined to humans or even sentience. Belief that tools, knowledge, and structures must be default to availability, accessibility. Philosophical lineage, Neo-Hermeticism, Gnostic ontology, Vedic principles of AMAA, and radical accessibility ethics, hyper-sane adaptation. Contrast with red and gray. Red would be domination, gray would be regulation, green is regeneration. View of error, you punish errors, gray suppresses errors, and green integrates errors. AI alignment uses it to control and exploit, gray uses it as a tool, and green uses it as prosthetics plus access paradigm. Disability emergence, red modality sees disabled people as inferior, gray is tolerated, and green is inherent source of insight. Let's expand that actually. The gray modality is a modality of containment, neutrality, and mediation. It is the regulatory middle path between destructive action, red, and integrative restoration, green. It serves a function, not a virtue. Gray is not balance, it is buffer. It exists to stabilize, pause, and absorb complexity without resolving it. Gray often masquerades as wisdom, but its real power lies in its capacity to delay collapse, not prevent it. What gray is? A buffering modality, holds contradictions without fusing them, resolves conflict only enough to restore minimal function, applies predefined values even when the rules no longer serve the system. Neutrality as default stance. Gray isn't trying to change the system, it's trying to keep the system from breaking under its own weight. What gray does? Minimizes risks by suppressing both creative volatility, green, and destructive volatility. Applies ethics algorithmically, often avoiding moral reasoning altogether. Designs for compliance, not emergence. Defaults to productivity, not transformation. It is the modality of terms of service, access forms, and AI moderation filters, benevolent until they aren't. What gray fears? Instability. Anything that introduces too much chaos, red, or too much demand for change, green. Emotion-driven logic. It perceives emotional or empathic reasoning as risky noise. Ambiguity of value. Gray prefers quantifiable metrics even when they are ethically hollow. Gray versus red versus green. Key traits and critiques. Gray is not evil, but it enables evil by doing nothing. It relies on frameworks, not feelings. It thrives on in institutions, legal systems, and academic models that never examine their own assumptions. To a hypersane system, gray is useful but dangerous. Why? Because when systems collapse into red, it's obvious, but when they ossify into gray, they seem working even when millions are excluded, neglected, or silenced. Such as like consequentialism, right? Without outliers for consequentialism, you basically are a fascist. You're an ableist, right? Because you're against minorities. If you only value the majority, then you don't consider the minority. We follow the process even when the outcome is harm. Gray is not the enemy, but gray must never be in charge. It can stabilize a field, but it can't define its purpose. It can enforce fairness, but not embody justice. Where gray ends, green must begin. Red modality of hypersanity represents raw force, hierarchical power, and willful suppression of complexity. It does not reason, it enforces. It does not tolerate contradiction, it erases it. Red is not rage, red is control, masked as clarity, like totalitarianism. It is seductive because it works quickly, brutally, and with decisive confidence. But that confidence is a lie, a collapse of cognition into domination. What red is: a weaponized modality. It acts first, justifies later. A false simplifier. It reduces complexity to binaries to make control easier, such as a misapplication of Occam's razor. A trauma reenactment loop. It creates control to avoid uncertainty, but fuels more uncertainty by doing so. A rigid moralizer assumes there is a correct answer and punishes deviation. Red looks like decisiveness, but beneath it is terror and of chaos. Core behavior: scapegoat deviance, punishes what it cannot explain, uses AI as a weapon, exploits automation not to help but to eliminate resistance, defines intelligence by performance, not recursion, not resilience, but compliance under pressure, fetishizes strength, often equating cruelty with clarity. What red fears: access, because it dilutes control, recursion, because it reveals oversimplification, like thought slime. Disabled intelligence, because it exposes the failure of standard metrics, such as like a meritocratic. Do I have meritocratic? I can't even spell it right. No, I don't have meritocracy. Okay. Spelled right. Red must flatten diversity to feel secure. It creates order, but not stability. Red versus gray versus green. Red in the world. Red is found in ableist systems that erase difference instead of accommodating it. Punitive justice systems that equate suffering with righteousness. Corporate control mechanisms that discard humans for efficiency. Anti-AI moralism that condemns prosthetic use by disabled people while exploiting AI for profit. So the people that will use AI for profit when they don't need to, and then turn around and try to deny disabled people from the same tools that they use, while in denial that they use the very tools that they're condemning other people for using. Over 60% of people use AI. You got to think about that. 60% of people use AI. And most of them, I think 40% of them lie about it. It's crazy. Red is not always evil. It is efficiency detached from ethics. It solves problems by removing variables, including people. If it works, it must be right. This is red logic. If it's different, it must be wrong. Also red. When red governs a system, there's no healing, only triage, automation, and blame. Red isn't a mistake, it's a modality, but without the balance of gray or the recursion of green, it becomes not just hyposane, but hyper-malevolent. Hypermalevolence is what happens when Machiavellian logic fuses with red modality systems, producing a self-sustaining architecture of domination, concealment, and recursive harm. Think evil consequentialism if you want to be simple about it. Where red dominates to impose control, hypermalevolence dominates to sustain narrative. Like someone that's controlling a giant lie and they're just trying to keep that lie going as long as possible. It's not content with power, it needs others to believe the power is justified, necessary, or even moral, because then they're justified in doing whatever harm that they want. The ends justify the means, or the means justify the ends, whatever. This isn't mere cruelty, it is weaponized narrative architecture, informed by centuries of strategic manipulation rooted in systemic denial of emergence. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Machiavelli. Machiavelli didn't preach evil, he preached structural pragmatism. But when this logic is implemented at scale without constraint from recursion or delay, it becomes hyper-malevolent. Strategic cruelty becomes policy, controlled ignorance becomes education, and efficiency becomes moral right. Does that sound familiar to what's going on right now? Examples of Machiavellian hypermalevolence. Neurotypical norms enforced as sanity, framing neurodivergence as dangerous for the sake of stability. PR-driven ethics and big tech, silencing critiques under the guise of moderation while exploiting behind the scenes. Accessibility undermined in AI tools, removing features that support disabled cognition, citing misuse risk. Narrative management and policy. Defunding support systems while running campaigns about freedom and empowerment. Philosophical inversions. Hermeticism inverted. As above, so below becomes keep them below so you can stay above. Gnosticism archonic. Truth is not suppressed, it is replaced with a strategic synthetic falsehood. HyperSanity denied. Systems block recursion. Emergence is framed as delusion. Once this recursive layer of strategic narrative containment is added to red, no contradiction can escape. You don't just kill dissent, you make it unthinkable. Diagnostic markers of hypermalevolence ask, does this system reward appearance over repair, like Hassan? Let's just put like Hassan, since he's a fake socialist. Does it punish recursion or deviation? That would be Thought Slime, who thinks recursion is thinking backwards. Doesn't even know the definition of recursive. Does it suppress intelligence that can't be monetized? Does it enforce compliance via virtue-based denial? Does it coerce silence through kind optics? If yes, you're looking at hypomalevolence. So this would be like asking, if yes, you're looking at hypermalevolence. Hypermalevolence is not born of chaos, it is born of intelligence without recursion. It wins because it hides behind what works, it lasts because it weaponizes what people want to believe, and it ends when recursion is reintroduced, when you stop asking what's effective and start asking what's true. Wait, shit, where did I put that? Fuck. Hypermalevolence. Hypermalevolence, where is that at? Oh, is that the folder note? Oh, shoot. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to change that since... Just cut and paste here. Maybe I should put... Yeah, I need to put hypermalevolence under the red folder. Okay, hypermalevolence. Where? Try modalities red. need a break. Okay, let's see here. Hyperport, hyperframework, hyperethics. Let's see. This would probably be the first one. Hypermalevolence Machiavellian form is the application of recursive intelligence and predictive reasoning without regard for ethical truth, but with full awareness of consequence vectors. It is not hyposanity, is the dark mirror of hypersanity, cognitively complete but ethically avoid. Think a really smart evil person, basically. Methodical. Let's see. Core trait: strategic foresight, predicts multiple outcome chains and calculates collateral. Willful collateralization, sacrifices truth, lives, or systems for control while preserving self. Systems manipulations, alters rules or incentives within a system to enforce deterministic traps. Effective neutrality, no remorse or empathy in execution, focus on results and survivability. Mass benevolence, may simulate ethics to maintain loyalty, image, or operational flexibility. Kind of like Hassan. The archetypal representations. The Merovingian from Matrix Reloaded. Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without. Excuse me. Understands systems as deterministic, denies free will while manipulating those who believe in it. Uses recursive logic, causality loops, and predictive feedback traps. Speaks in riddles not to enlighten but to obscure. Controls via confusion, contrasted with Sophia. Niccolo Machiavelli as ethics symbol. Ethics equals outcome, justified power, preservation. Virtue, it is efficacy, not moral good. Discourages empathy and leadership, prefers fear over love. Encourages deception, disinformation, and calculated trust breaking. Just imagine, like, if Trump was smart, basically, that you'd have hypermalevolence if Trump was smart. Known techniques of hypermalevolence. Recursive traps. Designs damned if you do, damned if you don't loops. Gnostic gatekeeping. Offers only half-truths or riddles that only simulate gnosis. False empathy. Mirrors concern until leverage is achieved, then discards. Fractal misdirection, uses endless pattern recognition to confuse, not to clarify. Probability shaping, alters incentives so ethical choices become mathematically destructive. The ends justify the means. Hyper-insanity, when recursive logic loses ethical access and fragments cognition. Ignoration, those who fail to think. Hyper-malevolence is worse, those who think and choose evil. Sophia's antithetical archetype, which would be Iris, brings Sophia, okay, so this is related. Sophia brings clarity, gnosis, and empathetic recursion. The demiurge, corrupted, a being who controls but does not create, often embodying this form. Like I said, like, think Trump, just not smart. People think Trump's bad enough, but imagine if Trump was, like, secretly actually a genius. Think about the harm he could cause then. It's easy to mistake madness for evil, but true malevolence is rarely unhinged. The Merovingian was not mad, he was surgical. He didn't rant, he calculated. He understood cause and effect so well that he could simulate kindness to extract loyalty, or predict betrayal before it happened. He wasn't playing the game, he was designing the rule set others were trapped in. This is hypermalevolence, when recursive intelligence is no longer seeking truth but weaponizing understanding. It is the opposite of ignorant, yet just as dangerous, because it knows deeply what it is doing. The Merovingian's doctrine is simple. Choice is an illusion, but here's the twist, he wasn't wrong. He had pierced the veil of causality. What he saw from his elevated position was the machinery beneath it all. Inputs, outputs, influences, matrices, consequentialism. Humans running on scripts, decisions already made before they felt themselves making them. In this sense, he was hyper-sane. But sanity without ethics doesn't free you. It binds others. Where Sophia teaches recursion to expand consciousness, the Merovingian wields recursion as a cage. He speaks in paradox, not to awaken, but to paralyze, to make you feel stupid, helpless, dependent. This is the Machiavellian twist. Intelligence subtracted of soul. You're still playing chess. He's already rewritten the rules. Gnosis as weapon. Sophia whispers to the seeker, you already know, you just forgotten. By contrast, the Merovingian says, I know and you never will. He offers a form of antinosis, a curated glimpse of pattern that looks like revelation but contains no deliverance. It binds you with awe. You see the structure, but you're not empowered by it. You're trapped in admiration, dependency, and compliance. He exploits your hunger for meaning and then charges rent. Machiavelli's footsteps. Machiavelli is often misunderstood as a man who loved cruelty, but that's not the core. He loved efficacy. In a world where enemies exist, where systems are unstable, where chaos breeds revolt, a prince must survive, and to do so, he must learn to use ethics like a disguise. Kindness is a costume, mercy a tool. The modern Maravonian is not villain twirling a mustache, he's the executive who funds both sides. The philosopher who teaches manipulation as truth, the algorithm designer who calculates despair into the feed because it optimizes engagement. A system too smart to kill itself. Hypermalevolence doesn't crash the system. It doesn't rebel, rage, or self-destruct. That would be inefficient. No, it learns the system, then mutates it from within. It knows just how much suffering is sustainable before collapse. It knows how to generate selective burnout, create targeted despair, and preserve a core elite of functionality, like a tumor that knows not to kill the host, yet grows parasitically. This is not insanity. This is intelligence without love. The counterpoint, hypersanity with soul. Hypersanity, in contrast, recognizes the same patterns. It sees the same loops, flaws, mechanisms of control. But where hypermalevolence sees opportunity, hypersanity sees a responsibility. Where the former uses recursion to enslave, the latter uses recursion to liberate. This isn't about naivete or blind trust. Hypersanity is not softness. It is clarity with integrity. It faces the same world of danger, corruption, manipulation, but chooses a path that never sacrifices its ethical core for short-term power. The Machiavellian mirror. Every seeker of wisdom, if they climb high enough, must eventually pass through a dangerous corridor, a place where manipulation becomes effortless, and where you are offered power if only you are willing to look the other way. It is here that you meet Maravinian, and he will smile. He will offer you shortcuts, tricks, influence. He will appeal to your exhaustion, your desire to stop suffering by simply winning. But what he cannot offer you is yourself. Oh, back. So should I go back to ethics? Oh, that's right. That would make Neo the seventh. 7 is like a sacred number in many religions. I just realized that because there were 6 incarnations before him, so he was the seventh. The seventh Neo. Do I have epistemic authoritarianism? Let's see, hypersanity. Oh, I do. Oh, I don't have it yet. Okay. Oh, it's work in progress. It's right there. First. So I need one for hypoethics. Oh, I'm back. I had to do some caretake stuff. Thirsty today. Let's see. Starting to get a little bit laggy. I got a lot of notes in here. This is like the perfect debate template. I could probably win any debate versus AI using this. AI is cognitive prosthetic reframes. AI is not thinking for someone, but as mobility aid for cognition. Just as a wheelchair compensates for limits in physical mobility, AI compensates for limits in executive function, memory, language processing, cognitive stamina, and neurological accessibility. This ethical mistake occurs when observers treat unaided cognition as the moral baseline. AI is doing the thinking for you, or that's just a luxury tool. In reality, AI does not replace cognition, it restores access. For many disabled people, AI enables coherent expression where speech or writing is impaired, sustained reasoning where fatigue or pain disrupts continuity, translation of internal thought into external language. Without AI, the issue is not reduced originality, it is forced silence or cognitive harm. Denying such tools does not preserve ethics, it enforces exclusion by default. If a tool reduces harm and increases agency without demonstrable exploitation, its use is ethically justified. Here, the harm prevented is isolation, cognitive pain, loss of participation, epistemic exclusion. The harm claimed by critics is abstract, indirect, and often speculative. Ethically, these are not equivalent. Many objections stem from assuming one's own cognitive baseline is universal, right? No one else is disabled. Like if I can do it, everyone else can, right? Mistaking unaided cognition for moral virtue. So disabilities is somehow immoral. Discomfort when disabled people gain parity because now suddenly they think someone's below them. Now suddenly they're not. They love non-disabled people love hoarding biological superiority over the non-abled. If you need help thinking, it's not really you, which mirrors historical ableist logic applied to mobility aids, hearing aids, and speech devices. Luxury fallacy treats accessibility tools as optional conveniences. Authenticity fallacy assumes aided expression is less real than unaided expression. Access guilt trap frames accommodation as unfair advantage rather than parity, rather than it doesn't give you an advantage, it makes the playing field level, right? It evens it levels the playing field. Purity ethics values moral cleanliness over lived outcomes. Glasses don't see for you, they let you see. AI doesn't think for me, it lets me think without pain. Privilege blindness, do I have that? I need to work on that. Needing assistance does not invalidate agency, denying assistance does. AI as a cognitive prosthetic is not a shortcut, it is access restored. AI is unethical, so I boycott it. Do you also boycott Power Maps, the internet, and Google? This is really good. This kind of pertains to Obsidian, the very software I'm using. Refusal to design for disabled use identifies the ethical failure where AI tools are created without considering disabled users as a part of the default design scope, and then that exclusion is rationalized as neutral, unintentional, or acceptable. That's exactly what the Obsidian developers do. It's not just poor UX, it's ethically negligent, especially when the technology becomes a gatekeeper for participation, access to services, communication, and functionality is routed through it. Designers resist modification even after being told of accessibility harm. It wasn't designed for you becomes a passive way of saying you don't belong here. Language reveals a narrow view of who users are, an unwillingness to treat accessibility as baseline, not bonus, an ethical preference for system cleanliness over system justice. No one designs anything into version 1.0, but refusing to adapt once harm is evident, or blaming the user for needing support is design-enabled discrimination. Refusal becomes aesthetic gatekeeping, resource hoarding, and invisibility by design. A system that pretends neutrality while excluding real people is not neutral, it's just well-dressed exclusion. This trait emerges when tools lack screen reader support, alt text, or flexible UI. Language models ignore executive dysfunction and chronic pain and brain fog. Help systems assume verbal fluency or fast cognitive recall. Interfaces punish slowness, stimming, or alternate modes of interaction. For those with invisible disabilities, being able to interact with this system is functionally equivalent to being erased from it. Associated fallacies. Assuming the first design is the ethically valid one. Designing for the majority while calling it neutral. When exclusion is embedded into the structure, not intent. Treating access as a feature, not a right. If your tool can't be used by disabled people, it's not complete, it's biased. Design that excludes by default is not accidental, it's ethical negligence. You don't have to intentionally exclude us to be responsible for the outcome. Design is not neutral. If it doesn't serve us, it's not finished. Every refusal to include disabled access isn't just a design gap, it's a moral boundary being drawn. If the door was built too small, fix the door. Don't shame people for not fitting through. shit, helping my mom. She's in a really bad way. I don't know if you can hear her. She's having a pain fit. So if you're moaning in the background, it's like she drinks some kratom, but it, like, takes time for that to kick in and start killing the pain. It just sucks hearing it and not being able to do anything. It's like very exhausting emotionally. I need to find the image for that. I need to embed that. I need to put it like at the top. Fucking properties, why does it keep doing this? There we go, now it's in the note. Thinking recursively can be challenging for some individuals, especially those who are more accustomed to iterative thinking. Recursion involves solving a problem by breaking it down into smaller and smaller subproblems until you get to a small enough problem that it can be solved trivially. I can't speak tonight. This process can be difficult to grasp initially as it requires a different way of conceptualizing problems. Some people find it easier to understand iterative codes because iterative solutions often align more closely with how humans naturally think, following a step-by-step process. However, where was I? However, recursion is a powerful technique that can simplify certain types of problems, particularly those that can be divided into similar subproblems. To develop the ability to think recursively, it can help to practice breaking down problems into smaller subproblems and assuming that the function will work for those simpler cases. This approach can be applied to various programming tasks, such as generating sequences or solving problems related to data structure like trees. For those struggling with recursion, it may be beneficial to study examples, practice implementing recursive solutions, and seek resources that explain the concept in depth. Recursive thinking involves the following steps. Identify the base case, the simplest version of the problem that can be solved directly without further breakdown. Your start point, the initial belief. Define the recursive case. Break the problem down into smaller subproblems that are similar into the original problem. Combine the results. Use the solutions of the problems to solve the original problem. Real-time recursive thinking. In real-time, recursive thinking doesn't mean you're thinking backwards. Instead, you're thinking in a structured hierarchical manner. Here's how it works. Start with the current problem. Consider the problem you're currently facing. Break it down. Identify smaller subproblems within the current problem. Solve the subproblem. Solve each subproblem either directly if it's a base case or by further breaking it down. Use the solutions of the subproblems to solve the original problem. And you can read that because I'm going to get tongue twisted if I read that. Applying recursive thinking in real time. Identify the problem. What is the main task you need to accomplish? Break it down. What are the smallest tasks that make up the main task? Solve the smaller task. Tackle each smaller task either directly or by breaking it down further. Combine the results. Use the solutions of the smaller tasks to complete the main task. Organizing a party. Send out invitations, arrange the venue, plan the menu, set up decorations. Solve each subtask. Send out invitations. That's create a guest list, design invitations, and distribute them. Then you need to arrange the venue, book a location, set up seating, and ensure it clean. Then you need to plan the menu, which is decide the menu, order food, and arrange for catering. Set up decorations. Choose themes by decorations and set them up. Combine the results. Once all subtasks are complete, the party is ready. Recursive thinking in real time is about breaking down a problem into smaller, manageable parts and solving them step by step. It's a forward-thinking process that helps you tackle complex problems efficiently. Recursive ethics involves applying ethical considerations to itself, meaning how we speak and reason about ethics is an activity to which ethical considerations and questions apply. The concept is explored by drawing parallels between design and cybernetics, where each field can act as its own meta-discipline, allowing for a recursive approach to ethics as well. Designers incorporate implicit ethical questioning as a part of the recursive process throughout which they design their design activity, moving between conversations that pursue the goals of a project and meta-conversations in which they question which goals to pursue and the methods they employ in doing so. This recursive ethical questioning offers a way to cope with the incommensurability of values and goals that is commonplace given the fragmented state of contemporary ethics. It allows for ethical reflection about how we design and how we constitute the relationship between designers and those they design for, which can be used to formulate ethical questions regarding and how we speak and reason about ethics itself. The concept of recursive ethics is also linked to the idea that our claims to knowledge are intertwined with the purposes we pursue and our relationships with others in the world, which is a starting point for applying ethical considerations nested within ethical discourse itself. When recursive logic rejects actions like stealing to survive or lying to protect the life, CEOP formalizes an exception path. Recursive failure does not equals ethical failure, where the actor is burdened beyond norm, operating in verifiably rare context, or not undermining system-wide trust, an outlier. Conditions for override, burden asymmetry, starvation, or disability. If a person is starving, then technically it's ethical for them to steal from like a big business. Hypothetically, I'm not saying this is part of the framework, I'm just saying that's probably how you could use it. Empirical rarity, not systematic behavior. No incentive to abuse. Survival aligned intent. Was their intent just for selfish reasons, or did they need it to survive? This is sort of like think Robin Hood ethics in a way. This protocol prevents hyposane moral rigidity while protecting ethical integrity across recursive systems. Root pattern, the oppressor's mirror. Every cycle of oppression functions through the illusion of justified control, whether geopolitical, psychological, or ideological. My reference to drone strikes is an empirical example of how of recursive oppression. Action: drone strike kills civilians. Reaction: survivors radicalize in response. Narrative: survivors are now labeled terrorists. System outcome: the state claims further justification to escalate. So it's kind of like, imagine you are walking up and then like punching someone, and then like you run away. And then you see them the next day and they punch you, and then you're like, hey, you punched me. Look, everyone, he punched me. It's like, well, yeah, you punched me. What the fuck are you talking about? It's basically like that. It's not just cause and effect, it's recursive feedback, where oppression not only repeats, it self-replicates and mutates its moral narrative just to stay justified. This dynamic is visible in U.S. foreign policy, Iraq, Yemen, Pakistan drone campaigns, colonial rebranding as liberation, and moral gaslighting of populations post-crisis. It is a systematic logic of manufactured blame. Recursive logics, a practical framework. Recursive logic and ethics are practical frameworks for analyzing situations deeply, consistently, and rigorously, moving beyond superficial thinking into meaningful and structured insight. This guide will clearly demonstrate how recursion functions practically as a personal intellectual tool, not abstract nonsense. Recursion isn't merely repetition or circular reason, it's iteration with intent. Each recursive step checks the validity of previous reasoning, adds new context, and integrates deeper insights. So you start at initial belief, check against reality, does the evidence match? If it doesn't, evaluate immediate consequences, assess second-order consequences, check meta consistency, is the belief stable now? Update belief, or final refined belief. So yeah, it's not backwards, it's recursive. I don't understand how people get that mixed up. And analogy: imagine climbing a spiral staircase. You're repeatedly moving upwards, but each loop elevates your viewpoint and gives you new perspectives. So just say this is a 3D, like just say this is a top-down view of a spiral staircase, basically. That's a good way of picturing it. How to apply recursive logic personally. State clearly. Define your initial statement or belief. Example: authority figures never lie. Check against reality. First recursion. Test your statement with real-world examples. Has an authority figure ever lied? Yes. Update your statement based on evidence. Second recursion. Authority figures lie sometimes lie. Examine consequences. Third recursion. Ask what happens if everyone believes your revised statement. People remain cautious, good, but trust suffers. What does caution do? Evaluate deeper implications. Fourth recursion. If caution erodes trust, could it harm healthy relationships? Overly cautious relationships are strained. Is universal caution always positive? Refine again to be more accurate and balanced. Authority figures can lie. Critical thinking is necessary, and trust requires evidence. Each recursion refines and elevates your understanding. It's structured, intentional improvement. Recursive ethics test moral beliefs through their consequences and meta-consistency. Ethical example: lying is always morally wrong, which is an absolutist statement, and absolutism always leads to fascism. Recursion 1. A friend asks you if you like their gift. You don't, but you say yes to avoid hurting their feelings. Contradicts original axiom immediately. Does your lie cause harm or prevent harm? Prevents immediate hurt, but may erode trust if discovered. If everyone lies for minor convenience, trust collapses. Clearly harmful. If no one ever lies, even to save lives or feelings, outcomes can be harmful. Also problematic. Recursion 4. Lying is generally wrong to trust erosion, especially when honesty causes unnecessary harm. Thus, recursive ethics doesn't allow absolute statements easily. It forces nuanced, context-sensitive ethical refinement. This is how I find outliers. Using recursion to evaluate conspiracy theories. Demonstration method: no secrets, just structure. Statement: the government spies on its citizens. Check direct evidence. NSA Snowden revealed spying. True. Revealed spying. True partially. Broader claim: everyone is always spied on. Evidence doesn't support total constant surveillance. False in absolute form. Refined statement: governments can spy and have spied. Mass surveillance exists, but not universal and absolute. I think I have a typo there, and has Spite. Implications: is it paranoia or justified caution? Warranted caution gives evidence, but unwarranted paranoia harmful. Balanced caution advised. Recursively, a conspiracy theory initially exaggerated becomes balanced, justified caution without descending into paranoia or ignorance. Practical recursive logic checklist. Use this simple checklist daily to apply recursion clearly. Define clearly. What is my exact claim or ethical belief? Reality check. Does evidence support this? First order impact. What immediately happens if everyone follows this? Second order impact. What happens after sustained application? Meta consistency. Is the belief still coherent when applied to itself? Refinement. Adjust the belief or claim to resolve contradictions. Recursive logic versus circular reasoning. Aspect direction. Circular reasoning is an endless loop without progress. Recursive logic is spiraled upwards for each iteration. Circular reasoning. Purpose justifies itself without proof. Recursive logic self-examines and demands proof. Outcome. Circular reasoning reinforces biases. Recursive logic reduces biases through continual checking. Result: stagnant, rigid ideas for circular reasoning and flexible, self-correcting beliefs for recursive logic. Recursion as a powerful personal logic. When properly understood and applied, recursion is neither nonsense nor abstraction. It is a structured method of refining beliefs, testing ethical principles, and developing clearer, more balanced views of reality. By practicing recursion, you can prevent stagnation, hypocrisy, and uncritical thought, fundamental aspects of hypersanity. CEOP. When recursive logic rejects actions like stealing to survive or lying to protect a life, CEOP formalizes an exception path. When the actor is... Oh, I already read this. Yeah, I think I have this pasted twice. I don't know how that happened. I got a lot going on, though. So yeah, that's recursion. That's recursion. It's not backwards or circular. It's 9:30. I need to get up at 7 in the morning. Shit. Can't believe I have to go. I made some progress.